I'm Tony Morton and level designer.
Christian Ricci, I'm the design development manager.
Chris Lena, senior producer.
So that one is actually it's really good. We talk to those guys pretty much every day. The Defiance IP was something that we started with them from the ground up together because normally you do get the show before a game or a game and then it gets turned into a show or a movie. That was something that we never wanted to do. So in terms of like looking at what's a show game connection that makes sense, we're always in talks with those guys on what happens. The fact that the setting is in San Francisco for the game and it's in Missouri for the television show, but it's in the same universe at the same time. It has to make sense from a story standpoint and then a gameplay standpoint for players. So if it's something that's really exciting that we can release that as an update for the players because it kicked off maybe in the show or vice versa, something that kicks off in the game that affects the show. That's kind of the connections that we're trying to see. And so players will experience that when these things launch, and then we'll be building those things as we go along. Definitely. So the fun part about this crazy experiment has been also the realities of production schedules. So television and movie development scheduling is completely different from gaming development. But we have creative folks on either side, so we both kind of, here's what we like to do, and we bring that to the table, and then that's part of the things that we talk about when we go, here's what we've got, what do you guys have, and what makes sense, and it comes out the other way. And sometimes it's stuff that we push through, and we go, this is the thing that feels really great, and the SyFy guys go, oh, that's awesome, and then they give us their notes back, and vice versa. Sometimes they come up with something that we go, holy cow, that was like amazing. How do we incorporate that into the game, right? And that's kind of been that good back and forth with them. So.
We're spending a lot of time on just polishing the quality of your gameplay. So just making tweaks, a lot of tweaks to make sure everything's flowing really good. Changing the balances on weapons and leveling, just so everything is kind of smooth and you're going from place to place. And of course, making sure everything's stable and just kind of clamping everything down, making sure everything runs well. But a lot of balance tweaks and changes and flow changes right now.
It's something that it's something that we're, again, part of the constant discussions of what we're having. So we've talked about, obviously they're excited about launching the show April 15th. So thank you very much, appreciate that. So we are talking about the possibilities, of course, of like the show does well, what's the next set of television tie-ins that we would have for the gaming doing well. But we've talked about before is that they build what they build and they do it well. They put together great programming for television. We are game developers, and so each of these things has to stand on its own. And so for us, it's good game first, and then for them, it's good show first. And it's really kind of the super product of going, how do we have these great things come together and be this really fantastic experience for a gamer who loves the show or someone who loves the show to experience the game. But for us, it's game first, and then past that, it's like, yeah, whatever we can do to make it more awesome and more tied in together, we look for that all the time. So that's been, we've talked about that. We've talked about where do we go once the season is up for the first season of the show for the television times. But again, it's got to make sense. That is the fun reality of trying to do something like this that really hasn't been done before, is that balancing act of, again, their product, they're putting out their television show, and then us putting out our game, and making sure that we have crossovers that make sense. But again, these thematically, narrative-wise, these things have to stand on their own. So the player experience still has to feel like this really great thing within the game itself, just as I'm an audience member watching the show, and I have to be able to see that these things are being developed for the town of Defiance in the television show. But again, because they're in the same living world, it's making sure that, again, crossovers make sense. If we have a character that we introduce in the game that is an NPC character that makes sense for in their show, we would cross that over potentially in the show. We would have someone who might know that character, and so there's many subtle crossovers that we can come up with, as well as like big stake crossovers that you go, oh yeah, like the perfect example is having the character of Nolan right? He's like the biggest in-your-face kind of crossover you can have. That character introduced in the television show, but for a player who watches the show and has already started playing the game when we launch, April 2nd, thank you, is that you'll see that his journey begins in San Francisco, right? And so I watched the show on the 15th and I go, oh, I know where he was coming from. I know where he and Arissa were coming from. I know how that set off my experience as well. And then from there, we just kind of go from there. So
the other thing to remember is that we're making an online persistent game. So and the show is made in discrete seasons. So for our game to be good, we are going to be making content and supporting this game on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
So we're definitely going at this as as that kind of thing. This is a game that will be continuing.
Yeah.
For me, as the level designer and pretty much PvP dev, we have this thing called Shadow War. So now, you played a lot of games have instance battlegrounds. Some games even have these huge open world PvP areas. What we did was we took our open world PvP and layered it in right on top of the place where the guy who isn't in PvP is out there doing missions. NPCs are still living. So it's this huge living, breathing, dynamic world. You can be in Shadow War doing the cap and hold, and Arc Fall can fall next to you, which is completely, pulled by the server. Totally dynamic, totally natural. And then as the more people who play Shadow War, it starts to expand, it starts to grow, more cap points start falling down, more things come online, this thing gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So that's one of the cool things that we do as far as from the PvP side of things. And then again, I had mentioned Arc Falls. We saw this in a lot of our conventions where a couple people go to an arc fall, they finish it, they go to the next one. Well, there were 2 other people that were in a different one, and now there's 4. And now they go to the next one, meet up with 4 more, now there's 8. And before you know it, they get to this boss, and there's 50 people taking down this huge thing. And I mean, where can a shooter player get that on a console? They can't. So it's, we're excited. It's something that we've been working extremely hard on, and that's from all aspects, right? It's had to come from art, it's had to come from design, it's had to come from code to make sure we can actually run this kind of stuff. And it's extremely exciting to see people get together and see people fighting and see people look at the minimap and be like, holy shit, I'm playing with like 40 other people on my Xbox. How the hell did that happen? I'm used to playing with 4. So it's really exciting. It's one of the few things that we're pretty stoked about.